I did what I did for survival and not for out of a sense of patriotism. I wish more people would understand that, not that we shouldn't be thanked, not that our service shouldn't be appreciated, but I wish people would think about the root causes that people continue to enlist in the military, systems and structures. And classism.
Hey everybody, my name is Darren Calhoun. My pronouns are he, him, and I have the pleasure of serving as the digital pastor here at Urban Village Church. I'm joined today by Dr. Pamela Lightsey, our pastor at our Hyde Park Woodlawn site, and someone who brings a wealth of experiences and so forth. So how are you today, Dr. Lightsey?
I'm well, thank you. How you doing? How you doing?
I am feeling really good, and I'm glad that we could have this conversation that really almost randomly popped up, but I thought this is a good time for us to get into a few things. So one of the things that was so important to me is that you bring so many parts to this conversation. You have been a powerhouse of spirit, and you're not only a theologian, but you're also a pastor, and you're also a Christian, and you're also queer, and you're also a veteran. So that's a whole lot to be living and carried at one time in one body. Yeah. And right. And Veterans Day is coming up. And a lot of times for many of my friends, they're not really sure how to engage with certain holidays or how to respond to different people who are veterans in this time. So I figured this would be a good time for us to talk about it.
Yeah. Thank you.
So with that, like I said, you have all these identities or all these experiences. Could you help us get into this conversation by just talking about what each of those identities mean and how that shaped your journey?
Yeah, and if I miss one, will you remind me? Because like you said,
by all means.
When I think about myself, I don't think about myself in separate parts. I just think about myself as a whole person. So yes, the identity of being, as I understand myself, Black woman, that's, I can say a whole lot because I grew up in the South. I grew up in Florida. Grew up in West Palm Beach. I grew up during the 60s, which, if you remember history, was a hotbed for the civil. At that time, there's a lot going on with civil rights. And I grew up in that era. I consider myself a Black Power baby. So I came from the Black Power movement with big, thick afro pictures of me, my high school pictures, me with afro just beautifully coiffed and looking real militant too. Platform shoes, bell bottoms, I'm doing it. And that was an important part of my life, recognizing and coming to who I understand myself to be in a nation that prior to Black people weren't saying such things as I'm Black and I'm proud.
Yeah.
But the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement gave us really tried to instill in us a sense of dignity and pride in who we are. Now, I know that today when people talk about racial pride, some people recoil from it, but one has to remember these things in context, in historical context. Black people before that time were often told that they were less than. Black men or Black people, when approaching a white person on the street, walking down the street, would direct their eyes to the ground so that they would not look directly into the eyes of a white person and be charged with something that was ridiculous that could have cost them their lives. So this was a real shift in understanding who they are. And that helped to shape me. That helped to shape me with a great deal of pride, and not just pride, but if you notice, I rarely bite my tongue on an issue.
Yeah.
That is rare for me. And if I do, it's because I really care about the person and I don't want to hurt them. And I want to take some time to think over what it is that I have to say. Not that I don't care about all people, but I rarely bite my tongue because I grew up understanding that it was important to speak up and speak out. So that's my sense of Blackness, or what I call beautiful Blackness. My sense of who I am as a woman. I achieved that through my elders, and also grew up during the emerging feminist movement, women's rights movement. And in some ways, I'm blessed because I saw this stuff as it was coming into being, the feminist movement and the national organization of women, and women really saying, hey, we're important and what we have to say matters, and we demand the right to vote. And then not just the right to vote, but the right to be able to go and get credit in our names. There was a time that women couldn't get credit, couldn't get a credit card in their names. And so I grew up during that time where women really had the back seat when it came to the dignities and the things that they can do in life. And in many ways, the women's movement really benefited from the civil rights movement. And all of the things that we were fighting for, women benefited from it. I'm happy to be both Black and also a woman. I understand myself as a queer lesbian rather than simply identifying as a lesbian, because in my community, when when queer theology was emerging, and I would tell people Black people that I'm queer, they did not understand what I meant when I said I was queer. But when I said I was a lesbian, they understood that. So I identify as queer lesbian for the sake of being able to have conversations and be understood as I am within my own community. I'm also a mother. I was married for 16 years to a fellow who is now a good friend of mine. He and I are best friends. We managed to grow up together, to share a lot of pain together, and to come out on this side, really appreciating who we are and how we got to be the people that we are today. And I dare say, many people won't have that testimony, but I have that testimony. I have some lovely children, adult children, who keep me on my toes. Every time I put on something to go outside, I honestly think, okay, now I got to try to, unless if I'm going to somewhere special, I'm thinking about my daughter who's a fashionista. And I'm thinking about my grandson who really he's a communications major. He's doing a lot of work, videography down in Atlanta. He lives in Atlanta. So, and appearance is really important in my family.
Clearly. And y'all carry it well. You talked about being a woman, being a queer Black woman. I have the pleasure of having interviewed you for the Second Sunday podcast, which will actually be coming out, I think, next week from when we're recording this. But are there ways that you've experienced tensions with those parts of your identity?
Oh, yeah, of course. And very often in the church. When I mentioned to my pastor that I felt called to ministry, my pastor was a woman, so I had no problem being accepted in terms of my call to ministry with my pastor and with the small community, the church community that I was a member of. The problem that I had with being recognized as a woman in ministry came outside of that small church, local church itself, when I would run into Black men who would, without hesitation, tell me God never called a woman to preach. God only calls men to preach. And so it was tough at the beginning, and I would go toe to toe with men quoting scripture for scripture from around, justifying my presence in ministry. Then after a while, I looked around, I looked at what was going on in my life and how the Lord was blessing me and what I was achieving. I looked at them and I said, I'm not going to have these conversations with these men in these storefront churches with 5-6 members sitting in there and have been there and they still selling chicken sandwiches to make the budget. I'm not about to do this. So I stopped.
I love it. And I also know that you joined the military at a relatively young age. Tell us about that.
I joined the military right out of high school. So I actually joined while I was in high school. So my relationship with the military started the summer before I actually joined the military, I think it was. And so by the time I finished basic training, I'd already gotten rank. Or before I finished basic training, I walked in the door with rank. And I joined because my family was so poor. My mother worked as a maid. My father worked as a day laborer and a truck driver, just trying to make money for us. And though I was always told that I was smart, in school, I did not have a guidance counselor pull me aside and say, Lightsey, what are you going to do after high school? What college are you going to be going to? Let me help you with the application process. I didn't have that kind of assistance in high school. Other kids had it. Other Black kids had it. I was not one of them who had it. It might have something to do with the fact that I was so militant and so vocal and I was hot. But I didn't have that kind of guidance. There was a known fact that when you reached the age of 18 in Lily Mae's house, you had to have a plan for what you were going to do with your life. Because you were leaving her household. My mother had 10 children, 3 of them survived, so there were 7 of us. And she was not about to feed another hungry mouth, especially not one who was grown and as lippy and as resistant as I was. And so I joined the military.
Okay. And with that, I'm also hearing this potential tension of you being a Black Power militant person who's now in the military. What did that connection look like?
Oh, so I'm going to tell you something that I have never shared in a recording.
Exclusive.
You get an exclusive. So not only was I a Black Power, but my older sister trafficked drugs. And so I went to the military. Many people in my family were military persons, so it was not unusual for someone in my family to join the military. We joined the military largely because of economics. When I was about to leave for the military, because I was one who helped my sister package. I packaged cocaine and I packaged marijuana. And I stole some of it too while I was packaging. This was
okay.
Okay. But as I was getting ready to go to the military, my sister was no longer trafficking drugs, but she was with a guy who smoked weed. And so before I left, he rolled me a joint before I left. So I'm going off to basic training. I'm getting on the Greyhound bus. Every time that bus stopped, I lit that joint. So that by the time I got to basic training, to the duty station, and they were yelling and screaming and calling us off the bus, I was cool. I was good. I was feeling good by the time I got off that bus. And the drill sergeant had back there in those days, they would make you fearful. And so all these people around me who were trainees also, they were just shaking in their boots, and I was high as hell. It was not to be toyed with. And so that was my first day in basic training. By the time I got to what's called advanced training, AIT, I had become associated with other weed smokers, one who was military police. And so I was fairly taken care of in my early days in the military when it came to just trying to have space where I could be really relaxed and not be so stressed out by the military. So the military, I never allowed the military to stress me out. I saw it as a game, and I saw the military as the persons that learn the strategy. Those are the people that do well in the military. So, yeah, and I believe to some extent to this day that the people that learn the strategy of the military actually do well in the military. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is certainly some insightful background and context. I was not expecting this much.
Yeah.
This is why it's so important to just sit down with people and get to know their stories and get to know what their experiences are, because you just never would have guessed. And I wouldn't have guessed.
Whole person. I'm a real whole person.
A whole person.
Yeah.
If we fast forward a bit in your life now and so forth, you're a preacher in all of these progressive spaces. Are there things that people get wrong or people like assume about you as a veteran or about the military in general?
Oh, yes. But yes, indeed. I think one of the primary things that people assume is that people enter the military because of some sense of patriotism. And that's not the case. There's a lot of poverty in America, and the military becomes a way out for many people. And I go to places and people thank me for my service, and I get what they're trying to say. But I did what I did for survival and not for out of a sense of patriotism. I wish more people would understand that. Not that we shouldn't be thanked, not that our service shouldn't be appreciated, but I wish people would think about the root causes that people continue to enlist in the military, systems and structures. And classism, the fact that we have people who are millionaires and billionaires who never step foot in the military, never see any reason that they need to be in the military. And you have young kids who join the military because they're just trying to live, and they some end up sacrificing their lives, not because our nation was good to them.
Right.
Because our nation was horrible to them, to the extent that they felt that there was no way but the military for them to survive. They sacrificed their lives trying to exist as a human being. I think people need to understand that when they think about the military, and we need to be clearer about the people who are in the ranks.
Yeah, that brings up so much for me, because I think about how, we have this whole support our troops and Congress folks who are running on these campaigns of being pro-military and pro-troops. But yet in the United States, military people are a huge part of those who are receiving welfare benefits, homelessness, mental health illnesses, like all kinds of stuff that does not show this esteem and this care for troops. I feel like I call it rhetoric. And I feel like it's part of this message that we're being sent that, oh yeah, we're supposed to support the troops, but is it really about the troops? Is it really about the people, is the question that I often ask. How do you see that? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think we ought to support the troops, even when it comes to the military budget. Military budget is large, but I want our troops protected when they go into dangerous areas. In that regard, I say yes, support the troops. I'm not an advocate for war and war making, but I do think that because so many of our troops are join the military to survive, because not all of them, some join out of a sense of patriotism, some of them join out of a sense they want to wage war, but the people that I know and knew in the military joined for other reasons. I mean, I myself, my husband and I, at the time, we could not afford to buy diapers for my daughter. Mm. We could not afford it. And we had both been in the military, and we couldn't afford diapers from one week to the other. It was a church that helped us to have diapers. I don't like eggs so much to this day, because the first couple of months of my daughter's life, we ate eggs for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Mm. We had food stamps in the military as junior enlisted persons. And so when you say support the troops, yes, through your tax dollars, but if you know a person in the military, particularly those lower ranking military persons, it would be really cool if you would support them financially. Give them a financial gift, give them a gift card, give them something to say thank you for your service, because it's really hard. It really is hard.
Yeah. And I'm hearing this distinction between what we do to support the people, the people who are often in kind of difficult situations, whether it's escaping what's happening at home or living through military service with just the bare minimum. I've always thought it's so important that we do make a distinction in some of our political stances, whereas, yes, I care about the individuals and the people, but I myself often make a distinction between what is it to care about the people versus what is it to support a certain institution. And I consider the military an institution the same way I consider policing an institution. There are people who are police, but there's also the institution of policing. Mm-hmm. And
right.
I think both have been harmful, especially the Black and brown people. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, you are absolutely right. You cannot dichotomize the people who are in the military, who are on the police force with the institutions, and you cannot or you should not deny the history and the reasons why it got to be. Why are Black people on police forces? We worked hard to have. My uncle was on the police force. There was a time when there were no Black officers in Black communities, and Black people were treated like crap, like pure crap. And we worked hard during the Civil Rights Movement to get one Black officer on the police force. And that Black officer lived in our community, and we knew that person. Okay. And so there was a deep relationship with them. I'm hearing some of that desire for officers to live in the community more and more these days, because I think there's a recognition about the humanity, that police officers understand and hold dear the people that they're supposed to protect and serve, and that the people who receive the service from the police officers understand that their mama lives down the street, that they grew up about a mile from here, that they like hip hop, they like poetry, they like jazz, they like all of these things, that they're human beings, and it is a system. It is the system. If we can get to that, I think we would really be somewhere. And oh, by the way, Black officers on the police force are still a minority and still influenced very often by very crooked superiors. So let's get with that, which is why I'm glad you're making the distinction. I hope we can hold the distinction that not every police officer is corrupt, that when we protest against excessive police force, we're protesting against a systemic problem. Okay. And we're not protesting necessarily against an individual, but perhaps an individual who's done it, though at times we've said some horrible officers. But if we can get at the core of what is the problem, then I think we would be better off.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm wondering, have you experienced or do you experience any conflicts when it comes to your faith and military service, or how do you help others who may wrestle with that?
I don't have any conflicts. I still have friends who are in the military, friends who are high-ranking officers in the military. One of my friends just retired as a chaplain in the military. I think he was what we call a full-bird colonel in the Army. He only recently retired from the military, and I don't have any problems with that. As a matter of fact, while I'm thinking about the chaplaincy corps, if you think about the military, it's important that people from our liberal churches consider being in the chaplaincy corps. Can I say why?
Go for it.
Because 60%, I think it's about 60% of chaplains are from evangelical churches. 60% of chaplains are in evangelical churches. And you understand the theology and some of the things that are being spewed from the evangelical church. So imagine that theology being preached at soldiers, at airpersons who...
Let's name some of that too. Like, what are the things that come to mind?
Some of that theology is about that women being subordinate to men.
Mm-hmm.
a theology, that kind of theology where women are subordinate to men, a major theology about heaven and hell and damnation because of sin. Imagine hearing that. Majorly theology that's homophobic, the sin of homophobia being preached from a military chapel. Although I don't know that they can't preach that from a military chapel because nowadays, but they have that perspective. And so those conversations can be had privately. And so I mentioned 60% of the chaplaincy are evangelicals. 40% of the military identify, the last time I checked, overall in the military, only 40% of the troops, I shouldn't say only because it's a large number, 40% of the troops identify as evangelical Christians. So the evangelical Christian church, okay, is becoming a strong number in our military forces. Now you think about what's going on with the MAGA administration and those persons that are supporting that administration. And you think about the possibility that Trump might come back to office and the president is the lead. The military takes its orders from the president. Okay, so you imagine that full package, okay, being enforced in America. That's not a good picture. And so this is why I do not recommend young people join the military without a sound understanding of the force that they're joining. Okay. First, I like if person's going to join the military, I really recommend they enter as officers in the officer ranks. I have nothing against the enlisted ranks. I was enlisted myself, but a lot of the decisions and things that take place happen at the ranks of the officers. I do think there's a place for it. I hope that we can be gentle with persons who are in the military. I hope we'll celebrate those persons who are in the military, who are in our lives, because they're human beings. Whenever I travel and I'm shopping in the airport, I ask the clerk, I said, do you get military discounts? And then I promise you, the sheriff says, oh, here you go. You're at it again. We're traveling together. I asked for my discount, and the word veteran is on my driver's license. And I pull out my driver's license, get that, show them that, yes, ma'am, and they ring my order up. I usually have a 15% discount. They say, thank you for your service. When I go to Home Depot, I go to Lowe's, I pull out my stuff, get my discount. Thank you for your service. And that I say, yes, that's a good way to thank a military person, especially one like me who grew up very impoverished. And the reason he was in the military was I was poor. So yeah, I accept every discount.
I'm all about us disrupting what we can within the capitalistic system that we can't escape at the moment. So I'm here for it. Yeah. And I'm also hearing that invitation to really consider what's happening, right? When we talk about this theology that is being preached with 60% of the, or potentially being preached with 60% of the chaplains being from this particular worldview. A lot of times we think, oh, it's just an opinion, right? Everybody can have an opinion and opinions don't hurt people. But the reality is we're seeing right now for example, a lot of Christians choose to be pro-Israel because they want the war to kick off Jesus's return. Yes. And this isn't like just reaching for ideas, right? These are things that people actually believe and then make choices, make votes, put people into office to usher that kind of thing.
Yeah, the return of Jesus, yeah.
Or when we think about various laws, like whether it's about reproductive rights, whether it's about the value of a human life, if you And again, this is me speaking from my own perspective, but if you believe in a God who is going to extinguish mass amounts of human life because of their shortcomings, then it makes sense to me that you would also agree that we should extinguish mass amounts of human life to uphold our political values, our economic values, all these other kinds of things. And so I feel like, yeah, this is where I feel like we're called to show up and to be different and to think different and to challenge the powers that be.
Yes,
looks like you're thinking, yeah.
I'm thinking about some of the work of the military. Some of the work of the military people rarely think about. It's not just about going to war. It's about protecting our natural resources.
Mm-hmm.
Have military who show up when there are hurricanes. Military who showed up and were at the Twin Towers helping. So there are a lot of things that the military do that it's not about shoot 'em up game. You know, it's really, they do serve very often in a peacekeeping role. And those were good times. My particular job in the military was a job where I had a secret clearance, so I was in communications. And so I had a sense of, at the time, not anymore, I'm far removed from it, I had a sense of how long it would take a ship to get to a particular place, because I had an understanding of large numbers of our ships that are out in waters that Americans know not of. I also have a sense of the diplomacy and how diplomacy is so important to keeping peace. I think people want our politicians to just do this and this, but there are a lot of things that there are a lot of interesting things that have to happen in order to keep the peace. I would say that Americans have no sense of what goes into that.
Yeah.
So I'm thankful for the military for that.
Okay. And then as we wrap up, we are leaders in a church, and we exist with all of our intersecting identities. And in my social media circles, I often see people not just polarized, because we all have different opinions, right? But sometimes we feel like, oh, if this person believes that, or if this person is pro this or anti that, then we can't be in community together. And so sometimes they'll say, we just shouldn't talk about political things, right? We should avoid it, or you should keep it to yourself. And clearly you're pretty outspoken, and I am too.
Yeah.
What do you feel like that means for our church? A church where we say we're bold, inclusive, and relevant, where we're not all going to agree on every single thing. How do you respond to that kind of sentiment of maybe we shouldn't be talking about this?
Yeah. Look, getting up in the morning for me is a political act.
Yeah.
Getting out of my bed is a political act as a Black woman. And for me, politics is the ability to negotiate life, okay? And the ability to live in relationship with someone else. And so all of life is political for me. To tell me not to speak about politics, it lets me know that you really don't understand what politics is. You know, the ability to influence, to reach a particular aim. It's not just, I think people limit politics to what politicians are doing. Okay?
Yeah.
And politicians only act because we are political. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because we insist on human rights. That's a political statement. That's a political work. And so in the church, I don't know of a Sunday where I don't speak politically, because I'm always advocating for justice. I'm always advocating for the righteousness of God. And to do so means that I have to do that in the face of evil that does not want that to take place. It means that I have to work against people who are insistent upon power and control. That insistence to be in charge and to be in control and to have everything is a political stance that I as a preacher cannot avoid speaking about. And I don't know how to preach without being political. I grew up in a Black church. The history of the Black church was birthed. The independent Black churches in America were birthed as a political response to oppression.
Good.
You have an AME church, an African Methodist Episcopal church, without Richard Allen and Absalom Jones said, "Oh, we walking. You don't want us to pray. You want us to go up there. Let us take our feet and let's leave this church. You will not have to see us again. But what we will do is build our own church." That was a political act.
Yeah.
All of it is politics. So the church can ill afford not to have a political stance. Not if it's going to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God.
Absolutely. I remember a few years back, I was in a UBC service, and somebody was visiting, and they walked out of the room we were in, and I'm like, oh, they just went to go get snacks. So I'm going at the same time to go get a little snack out in the lobby area. And the gentleman who was visiting asked me, I was like, "Hey, how's it going?" And he asked me, he was like, "Is it always so political here?" And I said, and this message, the sermon that was going on was a mixed race woman sharing her story of growing up mixed race as somebody who didn't fully fit in the Black space, didn't fully fit in the white space. And they mentioned who was the president at the time, but it was not about the presidency. It was about some things that he said, but all that to say, he felt like he should be able to just come to church and not have to think about the headlines. And I said to him, I was like, yeah, we tend to talk about the things that are relevant to the people who are here. And we do have people who are immigrants. We do have people who are from countries that are getting called S-hole countries. So it would be really important for us to talk about it. And he's, yeah, but I just want to get away. Can't we just talk about Jesus? And I'm like, oh, absolutely. Because Jesus talked about the things that were going on in his time that affected the quote unquote least of these. So for us to be a church that is not going to speak to the people who are in the pews who are experiencing oppression, I think that wouldn't be very much like Jesus. And he essentially stormed off and left because he was very clear. He wanted to escape the world and he wanted to escape reality so that he could think about a pie in the sky Jesus that maybe matched the ideals that he had. But I was so proud of our church that day that on a regular old Sunday that we could be having conversations that discomforted the comfortable and were a comfort to the uncomfortable.
Why was Jesus ultimately crucified? Because the politicians, because he spoke against the politics of his time. It's not like he was in there only preaching about, oh, the Lord loves you. I just want you to know God loves you. Jesus talked about Caesar. Jesus went in the temple and tossing tables. Jesus was always speaking politically. And if you want to be comfortable, there are some churches you can go to be comfortable. I just never grown up in a church where I could be comfortable in terms of my politics. And maybe that's the gift for me of the Black church. Black churches have always had a political word for our times. Why? Because the politics of the times were so adverse, so oppressive to Black people. So how do you, as a Black preacher, not get up and talk about politics? You've had preachers in our nation who have been involved in politics. John Lewis, they become politicians themselves because they felt like being part of the inner workings would be helpful to the world. You have preachers who, though they did not become part of the political arm, were very much involved in the politics in the city. They would start Cleage, Reverend, what is his name, in Detroit, would start entire blocks, what he called political blocks, where he helped Black people to bring their power together in blocks.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And it was, I may perhaps be changing now, but it was nothing during the election, the presidential season, and the major elections in the city for politicians to flock to the Black church to be given the opportunity to speak from the pulpit. Now, not so much, but that was par for the course. And in many ways, it still happens. Politicians are speaking. So I think, especially if you've been raised in a family that have taught you, we're not going to say anything about politics around the table now. It's just dinner. No politics, no talking about politics around the table. We're just coming together as a family. When politics is harming you, literally killing you, you're just going to sit quietly at the dinner table? You're going to sit quietly at church and say nothing. Literally, when people are being killed because of the politics, the public policy in your area, you're going to say nothing because you want to be comfortable? People rather be comfortable than be free. People rather be comfortable than to be righteous. Oh, no. That's, again, I don't bite my tongue. So if people want a pastor who's not going to go in on Sunday morning on some of the things that we're seeing, like 10,000 people being killed in Israel, in the Gaza, on the smaller Gaza Strip, I'm not the one for you. Like Hamas killing innocent people. If you don't want me to say anything about Hamas, and you don't want me to say anything about the settlers in the West Bank, and you don't want me to say anything about the killing of non-combatants, I'm a soldier. I'm a veteran. I know, I understand that the military should never intentionally harm non-combatants. You have to make this make sense, that the IDF cannot point its weapons in such a way so as not to kill non-combatants at this level that they're being killed. Yeah. You might want to cut this out of this recording. So I have something to say about it.
Yeah.
You have something to say about it. It's difficult for me to look at human beings intentionally committing crimes and not say anything. Crimes that kill. No.
Yeah. And I so believe that if good people say and do nothing, this idea that we all have, my mantra is we all have a role in the work of justice. There's something that we can do. And if we lean into our giftings, if we lean into our opinions, if we lean into the context that we're in, whether that's a church, whether it's at work, whether that's in your community, I think there's a role for us. We just have to find what it is. And we have to be willing to be bold, to speak up and to do what we can.
Yeah, and to be bold and to speak up will sometimes mean that you're speaking a word against the community that you love.
Yeah.
You're speaking a word against the community that you love. And I've been doing that for, I speak a word against so many Black churches. They don't show up. They don't want to sister in there. But they're wrong. So if I'm going to speak about my own people, don't think I'm not going to speak about white folk. Don't think I'm not going to speak about Jews. Don't think I'm not going to speak about Muslims. Don't think I'm not going to speak about Asians when we do wrong. I don't tolerate anti-Semitism. I don't tolerate Islamophobia. I don't tolerate anti-Asian behavior. I just not know. No. Yeah. I'm going to speak up because we're all knit together, Martin Luther King said. We're humanity. So don't ask me to carve out parts of myself and just address the areas that are comfortable for you. Because you're people. No, all of us. Absolutely all of us.
Absolutely.
Make no sense to me that this doesn't make any sense to me.
So with that being said, let's wrap this up and go home. If people want to engage, if people see this video or hear this message and want to wrestle with this as Jacob wrestled with the angel, what should they do? What's the next step that you think people should do in life or in church or what?
I I'm an educator. I think people should start reading as many books, as many articles as they possibly can. My book, some of the writings that I've written about, I've written about war and peace also. And they can follow me on any of the faces and insties, and they can follow me on all that, because I'm known to say things. They can do that. And another, be with one another and talk them through, and don't be afraid to speak your mind. Gently speak your mind. With respect, speak your mind. But speak it.
Yep. Jesus was all about love, and he definitely spoke some things that had people ready to throw him off the side of a cliff.
Honest people will disagree. That's part of life. Honest people will disagree.
Yeah.
Love one another. When we disagree with one another, then I think the best thing to do when we love one another, we disagree with one another, talk it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of room for us to do that. So Thank you for talking with me today. I appreciate it.
Welcome, friend. You're welcome. Always.
Coolness. And as always, if you love to check out what's happening at Urban Village Church, feel free to join us online or look at our website, urbanvillagechurch.org, and come check us out here in Chicago. And we'd love to see you, and love and hold tension and all that good stuff together. Thanks for joining us. Bye, everybody.